Hi folks, thank you so much for completing Module 1. That was your module that addressed the issues of supply and productivity, including how to assess the determinants of growth, the drivers of growth, as it were, from the supply side. So you've gone through the assessments, and those assessments have right answers and wrong answers. But no doubt you also have some questions regarding the narrative behind Diagnostica's growth, including in some more judgmental aspect. So in this video, I'm going to be going over both. So let's start off with some of the initial questions. First off, we asked you some questions to make sure that just so that you understood the perpetual inventory method, how to use it to estimate the capital stock. Likewise, as a warm-up exercise, we asked you to estimate employment. So for example, in Q1 2003, the estimated number of workers in Diagnostica was 39.2 million people. That's a rounded number. For a later period, Q1 2014 to Q3 2016, that average number increased to 48.2 million. Now, even though that was just a warm-up exercise, a little bit mechanical, you can see the issue popping up in Diagnostica. Why did employment grow so much? There's several parts of the story. One part of the story is that more workers came in from the shadows, from the informal sector to the formal sector. That would be reflected in an increase in labor force participation, since, of course, individuals who are in the informal labor market, even though they're working, they're not counted as participating per se. They were working before, but we didn't count them as working. Also, in previous years, there tended to be quite a bit of out-migration from this country, workers leaving the country and going to other countries where there are better opportunities. But by around 2011, that trend had reversed, reflecting both some long-run demographic conditions and also a less friendly environment for immigrant workers in destination countries. So even if these were just numbers, there were some issues behind the numbers. So now let's move on to the next big question, and we can take kind of a bigger picture. So the average growth rate of GDP over the period, the entire period, Q2 2001 to Q3 2016 was 2.2%. That's not a stellar number. One comparison, of course, is country X. It was much lower than in country X. So you'd want to ask why. So interestingly, we compared the sub-periods in Diagnostica, and we found out that output growth was highest during the period, this one here, 2010 to 2013, Q1 2010, Q4 2013. That was a period after the great financial crisis when actually growth recuperated in many countries, and then growth came back down thereafter. Now, interestingly, both TFP and employment growth were highest during these periods, higher than other periods. So we had strong labor force growth. Once again, we discussed some of the reasons, but also it may be that employment grew just as an artifact of the economic recuperation. So that we can fit this in with some of the other factors. And also, there may have been a demographic factor, what we call the baby boom, people born around 20 years ago just now entering the labor market. Of course, retirement would bring down this number, but that wasn't the dominant feature. So now we can speculate why TFP growth was more robust also during this period. Structural reforms took place. And also, in a related vein, the adoption of more advanced communication technologies. But now we're going to turn to another supply-side determinant of output in Diagnostica, the stock of productive capital. Now, interestingly, we've noted that capital per worker is actually growing at a negative rate. That may seem striking to you, that the capital stock is not keeping up with the level of employment, but really this may just be a measurement issue going on here. The fact that we had so many workers coming in from the shadows, they may actually have been employed before, but we weren't counting them as employed. So that's a factor that will bias us downwards. But also we should put a grain of salt in terms of our capital stock estimate. It's going to be very rough. Perpetual inventory, very rough. Even so, this is modest GDP growth, and capital stock growth that was modest contributed to GDP growth that was modest. It was certainly more subdued than in country X, your demo country. We also saw that the investment to GDP ratio is lower in Diagnostica than in country X. Diagnostica devoting a smaller fraction of its resources to the capital stock. Well, there was this bump up in growth in the capital stock, and it was during this period here, 2014 to 2016. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? Well, interestingly, what we do note is that even though the investment to GDP ratio didn't rise, what we did see is that TFP rose in the previous period, and that provided more resources to invest, and that's what we called the induced capital deepening effect. So that was present here in this country. So anyway, let's move on to one of the last questions, and that is, we discussed a hypothetical analyst who took a view on this country and who was looking into the future, and his idea was that in the future growth per capita would be on the order of 3.7%, and at the same time capital stock and labor and employment growth would be about the same as they were in the past. Well, we actually took a view, we found out that implicitly, TFP would have to grow by a whopping 3.8% per year. Now that's where our subjective opinions can come in. I, for one, am doubtful that TFP could actually reach that level, because it didn't reach the level in previous years. So I'd have to ask the analysts, what's so different about the future compared to the past? So I'm sharing with you my judgment and my opinion. Now, we have traded ideas about this analyst view for Diagnostica, and that was both in the online poll and also on the discussion. And we want to thank you for sharing your views. We are always interested in your views, and more broadly, we want to wish you good luck with the rest of the course.